Welcome back, everybody, to the Joey Osborne Show. I'm your host, Joey Osborne, and March Madness is finally upon us. One of the best times of the year, and it's time for my March Madness predictions. So let's see who's gonna win, and most importantly, who's gonna get upset. So starting off here with the East, we got Duke versus Siena, the 1 and the 6. This definitely should be an interesting matchup. I don't think you're gonna see too much special here. I think it's me, a casual 1v16. Duke's probably the best team, honestly, in my opinion, in this tournament, and I think this is an easy win for Duke, so let's just get that out of the way. Duke wins this one easy. The next one here this is a tough one here. The 8 versus the 9, Ohio State versus TCU. Both really good teams. I think this is going to be a fun game to watch. I think this can go either way. However, I'm really leaning right now to Ohio State. They've been hot. They performed very well in the Big Ten tournament, obviously getting to the finals and nearly beating Michigan now. So I think definitely for them, they're going to continue to improve and get actually semifinals, not finals, but continue to get better and improve there. And I think TCU, while they're a good team, I think Ohio State's got more momentum right now, and I'm going to go with OSU winning this one. Moving on here to our 5 and 12. You got St. John's versus Northern Iowa, and I think both teams, they play well. I think this one definitely favors St. John's out of the two of them, and I think St. John's it's a great program. They got good players, and I think this one, while it's going to be somewhat close, I think for St. John's, this one obviously them being a Big East champion, I think this definitely helps them out, and I'm going to say St. John takes that one now. Moving on here next to the 4 and 13. We got Kansas versus CA Baptist. Once again, there's one of the scores you really don't know about. Kansas obviously has been inconsistent. Obviously, Dalen Peterson has played some. He hasn't played some. It's questionable as what's going on there. And I think they're a team that could definitely be upset prone in this tournament. But I don't think that happens in the round of 64. So I'm going to take Kansas here over CA Baptist in this spot. Moving on here now to the 6 and 11 Louisville versus South Florida. Once again, this is an interesting matchup. I think both teams play well. They play hard. And I think this definitely for 6-11, this is going to be a good matchup. Obviously, you can see the actual pick stats here. You see, while Louisville does have more, there's a good momentum for USF. I think definitely out of the two. Both play well and look offensively. Here are the stats for the top two players. And I think both teams, they have productive offensive players. And I think this would be an interesting one. Obviously, looking at the big wins, I think out of the two, if you look at both, I do believe out of the two, Louisville has the better wins. And I think for this one, I'm going to go Louisville here in this spot. I think the ACC is one of the premier conferences in basketball, and I think it's a better conference than the Big 12 as well. So that makes me want to lean more to Louisville in that regard in this spot. Moving on here to the 3 and the 14, we got Michigan State versus North Dakota State. This is an interesting one. I think both sides will play well. I think I can see this one being a little bit more of a blowout. To be honest with you, I think Michigan State's just a really solid team. They play well. And I think this is a team that's going to go decently far in this tournament. And I like Michigan State here. So I'm going to take Michigan State in that spot. Moving on here to UCLA versus UCF. Once again, another very interesting one. I think this one go many different ways. I think a 7 and 10 always is very close, and I think this one just as well will be very close. I think both teams have played well. UCLA, I think they definitely play better opponents being in the Big Ten, and offensively they do have better players in this sport. The one thing with UCLA is if you look at them, now they have some great quality wins. They got one against Michigan, one against Illinois. You got a good one against Purdue. But then you have some, not the best losses. This Gonzaga won here, 82-72. I know Gonzaga's good, but this haven't been good as they have been in the past. But that one concerns me a little bit. I think also in this one, this Michigan State, this is a blowout. I know they beat them in a different spot, but they got blown out here. And this is somewhat recent, another blowout against Michigan as well. So that is a little questionable. However, looking at USF, really they don't have much in the win. We have great wins. I think Texas Tech is a good one, and BYU is no good one. And I think Kansas definitely is a good one, but obviously Kansas has been in and out with Peterson, so that obviously causes some issues. But, I think out of these two, I think UCLA is probably the favorite there, and that's who I'm going to take. And the last one here is UConn versus Foreman. This will be an interesting one. Obviously, Foreman has made some noise in the past, definitely getting some pretty close upsets, and I think this one could be very similar to them getting close, but I just don't think it's enough. UConn is just a bigger, stronger, more offensive team, and this is a team built to win a national championship as it has in years past, and I think this one goes to UConn in that regard. Moving on here now to the South, obviously, Florida right now, they are still playing, but I think out of the two teams, I feel like Lehigh is probably going to win. So I think this would be Florida versus Lehigh, but obviously, this is Florida. They're a great team. They had a little bit of struggles in the SEC Championship, losing to Vanderbilt, but if I still like this team, I think this team is going to go decently for them. And I'm going to take Florida here for this 1 versus 16 in the South. I'm moving on here to the next one. We got the 8 and the 9, Clemson versus Iowa. I think this will be a great one. Two great basketball conferences, two schools with definitely, well-played programs. Both have made it pretty well in the past. Obviously, Clemson had that big embarrassment last year with McNeese, so good thing they didn't get them again this year. If so, because I would have taken McNeese if they did. But obviously, again, play Iowa. That's a tough team. They normally do pretty well in the tournament. They don't, obviously get crazy for, but they can usually be, win 1 or 2 games. I like Iowa in that regard. I think out of the two, I think this could be your first upset here with Iowa and Clemson. Looking at the stats here, obviously you see Iowa overall out of the two has a significantly better offensive player. If you just look at the stats, you can see that. So I do like Iowa in that regard. I just think Iowa, honestly, I think the Big Ten probably, as much as I like the ACC as a basketball conference, I think this year the Big Ten was just a little bit better. And I think it has some better teams. And I think just looking at Clemson, their big wins, the best one they really have, they do have this nice Tar Heels one, but that's a buzzer beater, pretty much. And this other one against Louisville, it's a solid one, and this is more recent, but you look at some of these losses, obviously. Lost to North Carolina, lost to Duke, lost to NC State, who lost in the first 4 game last night, lost to BYU, lost to Alabama, and just looking at, I'm not too sold on that. Obviously, looking at Iowa, it's a little different, but then again, also, they are playing in a little bit of a better conference, in my opinion. Obviously, Nebraska, that was a good one. But I don't think Noble wins really helps Iowa. I just think it being in a better conference, and if you look at these games, a decent better than a close, there's not really too far off, except for this one here, that's a pretty bad one. But I think overall, they look pretty well. I don't think Iowa goes far, but I think Iowa is good enough to get the job done against Clemson for the first upset we have seen. So moving on here now to the next one, we got Vanderbilt versus the Shocker McNeese. Obviously, McNeese has their drip king there, and he is still back there, which is kind of funny. I don't think really we're going to see a repeat of last year. McNeese is a great team. I think they definitely, for what they are, they do a great job at being that. I just think Vanderbilt, it's got a lot of momentum. They're coming off beating Florida in the SEC Championship Tournament. I think definitely for them, they have the hot hand, and I think, these would be fun to see no upset from them. I just think Vanderbilt's too good right now, and I think Vanderbilt's going to take this one in a nice bag. I think the next one here we can look at is Nebraska versus Troy. This one's a little sketchy. I'm going to say this. I think this one's going to be sketchy. I think Nebraska's going to win, but there's something about this Nebraska-Troy game that makes me think potentially there could be an upset, obviously. They're a decent 4 seed. They have a good record, but I do have some questions on them and how they could play during the game. I think they're probably not going to beat Nebraska, but I could see things definitely getting out of hand for Nebraska to the point where Troy gets in this thing, if not has the ability to win. But I think definitely looking at the stats, I do want to still give Nebraska, but I think definitely this one, if Nebraska lets it get a little messy, I think they can come in and take that win there. So I'm still going to go Nebraska, but I can see some variance in this game right here, Nebraska versus Troy. Moving on here now to the next one, we have another one that I think is going to get very interesting, and I think this is the 6 seed North Carolina against the 11 seed VCU, and I think this one gets interesting, because in the most part, these are two teams that I think match up very interestingly. Obviously, if you watch North Carolina, you do know they do have a little bit of a turnover issue. They do tend to turn over the ball at a decent rate, and with that, there was one other issue in terms of VCU. they play tough defense. They are a tough team. They're very ferocious. They really get at you whenever you're playing defense. And I think for that, looking at that, having a very strong defense against an offense that is prone to turnovers, that makes me think potentially we'll upset a lot here. And in my own opinion, if VCU plays their defense the way they play it during the regular season, and they can really get at UNC and force those turnovers and play hard defense and force bad shots, I think VCU wins this. I really do. I think UNC, while they're a good team, if they're going to turn over the ball a lot like they have previously during the year, I think that's where your upset's at. And I think in this one, we're looking for a big upset. I think you get it here. And I think VCU, the 11th seed, is going to pick off UNC, the 6th seed. I think just in general, UNC, they've been obviously good this year, but I don't think they've been as good as in years past. I'm not as sold on this UNC team as I have been in others. And for this one, I'm going to say let's go for the upset here in this regard, because if VCU, they play their defense and they continue to play their defense as strong as they have in the regular season, I don't think North Carolina wins this, especially because of their turnover issues. I just don't think they don't. And I think this is why VCU is going to get the upset here in this regard. Moving on here to the next one, we got Illinois versus Penn. Obviously, Penn's a Scotsman because they won the Ivy. I don't think they're a good team at all. I'm not really going to talk too much because I don't think there's a chance they win this. I think Illinois is winning this one in a big spot. Moving on here to the next one, we have St. Mary's versus Texas A&M. This should be a good one, but I think this is your classic match above. The 10 seed is just a better team than the 7 seed. I think Texas A&M, they have, this is a bit better program, more money, more better players. And while St. Mary's is a great at playing the system they play, I just think Texas A&M does have the better players. They just played in a tougher conference, therefore they have the lowest seed. But I think Texas A&M is the better team, and I'm going to give Texas A&M here over St. Mary's. Moving on here to the next one, we got the 2 seed Houston versus Idaho. I think this one's going to be interesting, but I don't think it's really going to get that close. I think it's probably more of a blowout than anything, but I'm going to take Houston here in that spot. Moving on here now, up to the west, we got Arizona versus Long Island. Obviously, Long Island in there. I don't think they're going to do much of anything. Arizona is a good team. I think potentially they could get upset down the line. I really think Arizona, while they're a good 1 seed, I can easily see them being upset, but I don't think it's happening here in this spot, so I'll take Arizona there. Moving on here now to Villanova versus Utah State. An 8-9, and I think this is going to be a game worthy of an 8-9. I think it's going to be very close. I think it'll be a tough match, but I think out of the two here, at the end of the day, I like Villanova better. I just think they're a better team overall, and they have more, as in general, they do tend to do well in the tournament, so I'm going to go with Villanova in that spot there. Moving on here to the next one, we got a 5-12 again of Wisconsin and High Point, and this is another one where I'm going to put upset alert on. I think potentially here on this spot, High Point does play well. They have good players, and they play a great system, and they can force bad shots, and I think for Wisconsin, at times they've struggled to be consistent. They have started games off slow, and I think that's one of their bigger issues, and I think against High Point, they are a fast-paced offense, and they can stop on defense. So I think if they could slow down Wisconsin's pace, I would say they have it in this spot. There's a lot of people saying that it could potentially happen, and there's potentially an upset alert game. Well, I do view this one as a Wisconsin win. I think Wisconsin will win the game. I would say this is one to watch out for on upset alert. I don't think it's going to be an upset, but I could see it becoming an upset in that regard. Moving on to the next one, Arkansas versus Hawaii. I just thinking of this too. I've seen some people say potentially it's an upset. I don't see it. I think this is clearly Arkansas. They got a great team at Calipari. They got some great guys who've come in. I think they look to be pretty good, and I think in this regard, I like Arkansas in this spot, and I like Arkansas going decently far into this tournament, though I don't really trust Calipari's, actual NCAA tournament record. I will say in this one, I think they're not losing Hawaii. But then again, I've also said that when he was at Kentucky multiple times, and then a team like St. Peter's would come in and win. So we'll see what happens there. The next one here, we have the 6th seed BYU versus Texas. I think this will be a great high-class game. Both teams play well, but I think the edge really is BYU's three-point shooting. I think that's going to be the edge. It's a Dubastana has been spectacular this year. Honestly, in my opinion, I think he may be the number one overall pick in the NBA draft. I think if he goes, I think he plays great. And I think BYU is a sneaky good team. They're great at shooting threes. And I think in this regard, I want to take BYU here in this spot. And I think BYU is going to be that team to watch this year in the tournament. Moving on here now to Gonzaga versus Kansas State. I think this one will be decently played well, but I think out of the two, I just like Gonzaga better here. I think Gonzaga is just in general the better team, and they have a good track record in the tournament. So I'm gonna take Gonzaga here in that spot. I'm moving on here now to Miami versus Missouri. I think this would be a good one. Two highly powered offensive teams going at it. I think it's gonna be a fun, exciting one to watch. But I think out of the two, I think Missouri is more prone to having fast break stuff. I think they're more prone to getting offense in bucket and being able to get on runs there more than Miami. I think, and also as well, for Missouri, I think SC this year has been the best basketball conference. They play in a better conference, and for the most part, they have performed well in that conference. If you look at it, obviously, offensively, they're pretty similar teams. Miami also, you can look at these wins. Really, the best ones they have is NC State and Louisville, which, both good teams. NC State obviously lost last night, but it was a very close game of Texas. And Louisville, once again, is always a good program. But if you look at Missouri, they beat Florida. They beat Kentucky. They beat Vanderbilt. They beat Tennessee. These are pretty highly regarded teams that they beat. Obviously, they have a couple losses that aren't the best. The Alabama one does not look good. And obviously, this Illinois one, once again, does not look good, though. That's also in the beginning of the year as well. And I think this team has really changed from the beginning of the season to the end. And I think for this one, here's another upset, and I think that's Missouri there in that spot. And moving on here to the last one in the West here, we have Purdue versus Queens. This is a 2-15. I don't expect anything really out of this other than a Purdue blowout. So I'm going to go Purdue here in that spot. Moving on here to the last section in the round of 64, we have the Midwest. And I think this one's going to be interesting. Obviously, Michigan Howard played great in the playing game last night. They looked fun. They looked like they were a solid team, playing good offense. They were hitting threes. But I just think Michigan's just a significantly better team. I don't think there's going to be a 1-16 upset this year. I don't see any 16-seed teams. I'm like, ooh, that could be an upset. I don't think this is an upset. I think Michigan wins this one in good fashion. Moving on here now to Georgia versus St. Louis. This is going to be a close one. I really think this is really going both ways out of the two. I think obviously, I think Georgia has a little bit more of an advantage in the higher powered. And they have some solid wins here. Obviously, Auburn, well, they didn't make it. They were a decent team. That's a good win. Kentucky, that's a tournament team. That's a good win. And I think Alabama, that's a good win right here. And I like that that's very recently too. So they've, played better on recently here. But looking at St. Louis here, with their wins and losses, really other than VCU, which is good wins, I do like that. There's not really much out here that I'm really looking at. I'm like, I don't think St. Louis is going to win. And I think in this one, I'm going to take Georgia. I'm going to give the 8 in that spot. Moving on here now to the next one, and this I think is the most interesting of all here. You have Texas Tech versus Akron, and this one's interesting because of the main storyline with Texas Tech, and that is JT Toppin, torn ACL, out for the year. Their star player is gone. It's now just Kristen Anderson trying to run the show, and I think this is one of the biggest upset alerts, and I think this definitely is going to be the big one, in my opinion. I think this is a bracket buster here. Obviously, Texas Tech had a great season, looked great, but losing their star player in March Madness, right before, it's not a good recipe for success, and I think in this regard here, Akron, who has played very well all year, you can just look at their record, 29-5. They play consistently good basketball. They're a system team, and I think in this regard, I think they're going to win this one. And I think Akron could make some noise in March Madness. So I'm going to take Akron here at the 12 to upset Texas Tech. I think the main reason for that is, they have injuries. Losing your best player, you're not going to play well after losing your best player. Well, I think they could squeak out of it against Akron. I think Akron's probably too good of a team to be able to do, BFI best player, and I think in this regard, I want to take Akron in this spot. I'm moving on here to the next one. We have Alabama versus Hofstra. Obviously, Alabama, the big news of one of their star players getting arrested for selling drugs. He's obviously no longer on the team, and that's going to be a big loss for Alabama in this regard. I think while Alabama's had a great year, you can see a lot of quality wins here. Some not quality losses, but overall, they've been most games that they've played, and I think in this regard, obviously looking at Hofstra, I don't think Hofstra really is that great. Obviously, this Pitt win does not make me happy. I'm a Pitt fan, but, definitely looking at this, I think out of the two, even without one of their star players, I think Alabama still takes this any day of the week, so I'm going to take Alabama there in that regard. I'm moving on here now to Tennessee versus either Miami, Ohio, or SMU, which obviously is currently playing at the moment. I think for that playing game, I'm going to take SMU in that regard. I think out of the two teams, I think Tennessee is a great team. They're a great program. They can play well. They can play efficient. And I think they're going to make the round 32, whoever they play for. It's Miami, Ohio, SMU. I think Miami, Ohio, if they make it in, as much as I like them, I just don't think they'd be able to beat Tennessee. And I think same with SMU. They're a quality team. I just don't think they're good enough to beat Tennessee. Moving on here now to the 3 seed Virginia versus 14 Wright State. I think in this one, both solid teams, but I think this one's probably more a blowout, and I think this one, I would favor Virginia in this regard. So I'm getting Virginia here in that spot. Moving on here to the next 7 and 10. We got Kentucky versus Santa Clara. I think this could be an interesting one. Obviously, Kentucky is a young team. They've definitely had some struggles this year. And then also, if you look tournament history-wise, Kentucky, they have not performed that great recently in tournaments. Obviously, have a couple of first-round exits. The worst one I can think of recently would be Oakland. That was with Jack Golke. I think that was a pretty bad one for them. But I think in this spot here, SCU, Santa Clara Broncos, I just don't really see it. I think Kentucky's probably just better at this spot. I don't think Kentucky's going to get too far because it's just not where they usually are. But I still think they're good enough in this spot to get past SCU, and I'm going to take them here in that regard. And the last one here, we got Iowa State versus Tennessee State. Honestly, this one's going to be a blowout, and I'm going to take Iowa State in that regard here. So now we're moving on here now to the round of 32, and let's start off with the East. We got Duke versus Ohio State. Obviously, Ohio State's got a lot of momentum off the Big Ten tournament, but I just think Duke, I think they're the best team in college basketball. They're going to be tough to stop. Obviously, Cameron Boozer is the big one you got to deal with, but, Cameron Boozer's played well too, and they've got a lot of other great players in that locker room, I think, in that regard. I'm taking Duke here. I just think Duke, I don't want to say they're unstoppable, but I think they are a team that can get far. Obviously, we've seen they've had a couple teams that have gone short, but I really like this team, and I think they're going to be a force to be reckoned with in the tournament. Moving on here now to St. John's versus Kansas. This can be an interesting one, obviously. I think Kansas, it just depends if Darren Peterson plays. If he plays, I think this is an easy win for Kentucky. If he doesn't, I think St. John's has a good win here in this regard. Just looking currently at the team, obviously, you can see Kentucky has some good wins there in that spot. So I think definitely that's something you can look at to help you out. And this one definitely is a tough one here. But definitely, I think if you look at this, could be an interesting one. Obviously, I think Darren Peterson, it looks like, I'm trying to get a status here. But let's see. I believe he is playing. So I think in this one, while this could be an upset between the 4 and the 5, I think out of the two here, just looking at this, obviously, SMU, St. John's, they have the big UConn win here, right there, and then they have, obviously, the other one, the Big East, actually a blowout, really, and they got some good wins here, and I do like them. I just think, though, if Darren Peterson plays, and he plays like he does, I think Kansas is going to win this one in that spot. So I'm going to take Kansas there. Moving on here now to Louisville versus Michigan State. I think this is going to be a really good one to watch. But I think out of the two, at the end of the day, I think Michigan State's the better team. I think Tom Izzo, obviously, he prepares his teams well for March Madness. And I think in this regard, I want to take Michigan State. I think they're going a good spot here. So I'm going to take Michigan State in that spot. Moving on here now to UCLA versus UConn. This one could get interesting. I think UCLA is in a good spot, but I think UConn probably is the better team. I can see this one definitely getting very close, but I think UConn is, they're a bigger sized team. I think they play better defense, and I think at the end of the day, while UCLA has great offensive skill, I think the defense and the big men is going to help win it for UConn. No, I'm not a big fan of UConn as much this year as in previous years. I think in this spot, I'm going to give UConn here, taking the win. I'm moving on here now to Florida versus Iowa. I think this should be a good one, but I think overall, Florida's just a really good team this year. They've been a little inconsistent, but I think they're going to pick it up here in March Madness, and I think this one out of the two, I think it's going to be a Florida win here. It may be a little gritty, but I think they'll get the job done. Moving on here now to Vanderbilt versus Nebraska. I think this one's going to be, I know it's a 5-4, but I think this is going to be super blowout. I just don't think Nebraska really is that great of a 4 seed. I think they can handle Troy, but I think Troy is a questionable one. I think Vanderbilt, especially with the momentum they have, I think they just blow them out of the water. So I'm going to have them move on. Moving on here now to VCU versus Illinois. Obviously, I think that's the big upset, VCU taking on North Carolina. But I think while their tough defense is going to make it tough for Illinois, I think Illinois is just a better team overall. And I think really, when you look at this, Illinois is going to be the team that takes, but obviously if you look at Illinois, Texas Tech win, Tennessee win, Purdue win, Nebraska win. These are good quality ones, and I think in this regard, Illinois takes there in this spot. Moving on here now to Texas A&M versus Houston. I like both these teams. I think this turns into a close game, but I just really like what Houston has. They're a young team, but they play hard and they play to win, and I just like Houston here in this spot. So I'm going to take them there at that spot. Moving on here now to Arizona versus Villanova. This one will get a little murky. I do think Arizona pulls it out because I think Arizona is technically the better team. But I could see this potentially getting close. But I think at the end of the day, Arizona's still going to take that. So I think they will win in this one. I'm moving on here now to Wisconsin versus Arkansas. This is going to be the interesting one. I can get this either way. I think obviously Wisconsin, they've been pretty streaky. And if we can look at the stats here, you can obviously see both greatly high-powered offensive teams. They play well. Also, I think alongside you got to deal for Cal Poly and his record really in the tournament. But you can see obviously Arkansas wins against Louisville. A pretty close one against Duke for the most part. They were somewhat close to Houston. You got Tennessee. You got Vanderbilt. A close one against Alabama. This Florida one's not good, but the Vanderbilt one I like. I think out of the both of them, I think these are a good one. I think Wisconsin, if we look at their wins, they got the Michigan one. That's a big one. You got Illinois. You got Michigan State. You got Purdue. You got Illinois. And they're in close games most of the time, other than this BYU one. But I think out of the two, I like Arkansas a little better. And I'm going to go Arkansas here in that spot to get to this point. I think Cal Poly is going to at least get himself to the Sweet 16 this time, with a solid team led by Acuff and Malik Thomas. Moving on here now to BYU and Gonzaga. I think this one gets interesting. I think definitely AJ Dubstanza, I think he's going to play elite, obviously. Liam Mason with 25.3 points per game, and Robin Wright obviously playing well too against Gonzaga. I think out of the two of these teams, while Gonzaga does have some quality wins against Oklahoma, Alabama, Maryland, Kentucky, UCLA, I just think this is, I think BYU, if BYU gets hot, they're going to play well. And I can see this one really being one of those upsets. And in this regard, I'm going to take BYU here as an upset for a 6/3 in this spot. Moving on here now to Purdue versus Missouri. I think this would be a good one. Very close, tough game. But I think at the end here, I think Purdue's the better team. So I'm going to Purdue in that spot. I'm moving on here now to Michigan. Michigan versus Georgia. I think this will be somewhat close, but I like Michigan here. I just think they're the better team. I think they're going 4. So I think they're going to go in this spot. Now here is the interesting one. Akron versus Alabama. Now obviously I think if Alabama, if they're at full strength and they have, Holloway, I think they're in a good spot. Here's the problem. They'll out him. I think against Hofstra, I think you can get away with that. But like I said, Texas Tech, when they lost to Akron, I said, I don't think you can get away with having a star player against Akron. Once again, I think, while this isn't the star player for Alabama, it is one of their stars, and I think it's going to have an effect. And I don't think Alabama's getting far at all. I just don't like Alabama, especially after I liked them before, but after, also hearing of the arrest, I just think whenever you lose a star player, that's not a good thing for March. And I just think this, for some reason, Akron, I just like Akron. I think there's something about them. They play the system well, and I think this is the team that can make some noise. And I think they're going to beat Alabama, though, in that spot. So I think that's a big upset, though. I'm moving on here to Tennessee versus Virginia. This would be a close, highly contested game. Looking at both of these, obviously, well, Tennessee does have the better offensive numbers. I think Virginia, if you look at their wins, they got some great wins here. And they got some really close ones. Other than this one Duke here, they win all these games, and they've won a lot of these. Tennessee as well, they won a lot of these games, but really, I think out of the two, I think Virginia is the better team. I think they have the better wins. I think, well, they don't have as good offensive players. They play a better full all-around game than Tennessee. So I'm going to take Virginia here in that spot. I'm moving on here now to Kentucky versus Iowa State. As much as I do like Kentucky, I think they're a decent team. I just think they're young at the moment, so I just don't really see them doing too well. And just looking at Iowa State, they got some really solid wins. St. John's, Purdue, Kansas, Houston. So I like them in this spot, and I think Iowa State is the pick there in that spot. So moving on here now to the Sweet 16, Duke versus Kansas. I just think out of the two, as much as I like Dan Peterson, I think he does well. I just think Duke is the better of the two. I think Cam Boozer's going to lead the way. So I'm going to take Duke there in that spot. I'm moving on here now to Michigan versus UConn. I think out of the two, this gets interesting. I think UConn has had some struggles toward the end of the season, obviously. Losing to St. John's in the Big East Championship, it makes me a little weary of them. And I think Michigan State, Tom Izzo, he gets those guys prepared, ready to go. They're a great system team. They play in a better conference. And you know what? I think they're an upset. I'm going to take the 3 of the 2. Give me Michigan State there to go to the Elite 8. Moving on here now to Florida versus Vanderbilt. This one I think gets interesting. Obviously, if we saw, last weekend, actually over this weekend, Florida beat Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt beat Florida. It got interesting, changed a lot of big things. Florida nearly didn't get a 1 seed because of that. And while I think Florida comes back with Vince in this one, while it's close, I'm going to take Florida here in this spot to win that game against Vanderbilt. Moving on here now to a 2-3, Houston versus Illinois. I think this will probably be, out of all the Sweet 16s, if this happens, I think this will be the best one. Closely contested. Definitely a young team in Houston, but they're great in their fundamentals. I think that's one of their best teams they've had in a while. As much as I like last year's team, I think this one, while it's young, it's a little more inexperienced. I do think it's a better team out of the other one, and I like Houston here. So I'm going to take them over Illinois in this spot. Moving on here now to Arizona versus Arkansas. I think definitely Arizona could be prone to an upset. Obviously, I'm a little concerned about that. However, just looking really now, Arizona, they got a lot of quality wins here. So I don't think they're completely, going to be upset in this spot. I could see it with Arkansas. But I think when push comes to shove, I think Arizona still wins this one. So I'm going to take Arizona here in this spot. Just, obviously I think as well, Calipari's record in the tournament's not that great. I think getting the Sweet 16s maybe potentially a little generous on my part, but I do like the Arkansas team. I think they got some great players, but I think Arizona is just the better team in this spot. So I'm going to take Arizona in this one. Moving on here now to BYU versus Purdue. I think Purdue has played well this year. I think definitely both of these teams are solid teams. I think BYU, if they get hot, they're tough to stop. And I think definitely all these two teams, well, I do really like Purdue. I think Braden Smith has done spectacular. I think AJ Dubestanza, he's going to be the main player. I think if he is hot and he plays well, I think they can get some big wins too. Obviously, I like Purdue, what they've done. But they've also had some questionable moments during the season as well. So, in my opinion, honestly, I like BYU a little better. I like AJ Dubestanza a little better. I think he's a player who can lead a team pretty far. I think he's one of those players you can rely on. And I think he's going to come up clutch in this tournament. And I'm going to take them over Purdue. So that's no upset, as I have a 6-2 here with BYU being Purdue. Moving on here now to Michigan vs. Akron. I will say this, as much as I like Akron, I think they make some big noise, but I also think they do benefit a little bit from both teams that they would face if they win. Obviously, Texas Tech, the first one, I thought the star player. Obviously, then Alabama, once they win. Once again, they are another star player, but they're not bad. They are out of one. But I think Michigan, I just don't really see Akron being able to compete with Michigan in this one. And I think this is where the magic one's out. I think Michigan's going to clobber them here in the Sweet 16. Moving on here to our last Sweet 16, we got Virginia versus Iowa State. This is a really good one. I think this is very close. But in this one, at the end of the day, I think I like Virginia better than Iowa State. I think Virginia is a better all-around team. It's close. I think definitely both sides are tough to beat. But I think at the end of the day here, looking at both of these, I just think, this is somebody this Virginia team I think I do before in this spot. So I'm going to go Virginia here, beating Iowa in a close one. Moving on here now to the Elite Eight. We got Duke versus Michigan State. This will be a really close one. I think this is going to be Duke's first real big test in this tournament. I think this Kansas one will be tough, but I think this is the real big one. And I think this one is both close, but I just think Cameron Boozer, they both played well. I think they're going to lead the way, so I'm going to take Duke here in this one to move on to the Final Four. Moving on here now to Florida versus Houston. I think Florida's been good, but I think they've been a little more inconsistent coming down the line. And I think for this one here, Houston's been hot. While they're a young team, they've been hot. They played well on both sides of the ball. And I think Florida seems to be somewhat of an upset. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to take Houston beating Florida in a close one in that regards. I think Houston's going to the Final Four. Moving on here now to the Elite Eight for Arizona versus BYU. Once again, I think Arizona, they are going to be prone to a potential upset. And I think out of the two of these, I think BYU, they're still hot. At this point, they're still hitting threes. I think they're going to win. I think they potentially have a spot at beating Arizona. I think Arizona is as good as they've been. I think they're prone to an upset. I think playing against a team like BYU, if BYU gets hot, which I believe they will, I think they're going to be not unstoppable, but I think they're going to be a very tough team to beat, and I think they have a shot against Arizona, and I think they take it here, and I think they're going to take this one. Because obviously, there always is that one team that gets pretty far, and they shouldn't have, and I think in this spot, BYU is that team. Moving on here now to the last one here, we got Virginia versus Michigan. I think this one definitely could get interesting. I think definitely, if you look at both very quality teams, they play well against each other. And I think out of the two, it could definitely get interesting in that spot. But I think definitely out of the two here, I'm looking at obviously Virginia plays well, consistently on both sides of the ball. But I think out of the two here, really, I think Michigan is going to win. I think they're the better of the two teams, but this is really close, and I think this one gets interesting in that spot. So moving on here to the Final Four. This is interesting. We got 2 1 seeds, we got a 2 seed, and we got a 6 seed. And I think definitely let's start on the field of Duke versus Houston. I think this one gets fun. I think it gets exciting. I don't think it's a crazy close, but I think it gets close, especially to the end. But I think out of the two, I think definitely Duke is probably the better of the two teams. I think Cameron Boozer is going to lead them with Zach Evans as well. They're a great player they have. And just looking at the wins, I think between the two, I like Duke's wins better than I like Houston's. But I do like Houston. But I think in this regard, I'm taking Duke here to go to the championship. And then looking at the Final Four, we got BYU versus Michigan. I think this one gets interesting. I don't want to say Michigan. I think they're frauds, but I think they're inconsistent. And if they get to play a team who gets hot, they can easily lose. BYU is a team that gets hot. I think Michigan can lose. And I'm going to go BYU as a surprise appearance in the national championship in this spot, with AJ Duba stands out leading the charge. And I think finally to finish this one, Duke versus BYU. I think it's a fun, exciting game. But I think at the end of the day, this kind of plays out a lot more like when Purdue played UConn 2 years ago. And UConn was just the better team, and they just blew the heck out of them. And I think in this spot, that's what Duke's going to do. I think point-wise, let's go 143. I think that's good total points. Obviously, I'm staring at this for fun here on the ESPN one, but I think college basketball 2025-2026 champion is the Duke Blue Devils. So I think definitely this is gonna be a good, fun March Madness. I think we're in store for a lot of fun, a lot of madness, and I think definitely this is gonna be a fun one to watch out. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed it, please comment, like, and subscribe, and tune in for more. Thank you guys, and have a great day.